Welcome back to Chicagolandians, a casual Chicago sports podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Cunningham, joined by my co-host, Connor Cunningham.
We're two brothers from the Chicagoland area talking about the latest and greatest in Chicago sports news.
Welcome back to another episode of the Chicagolandians podcast. I am your new host, Connor Cunningham, joined as always by my co-host, Patrick Cunningham.
Hello.
Now, listeners, before you freak out, I have not usurped the position of main host of this podcast. We're just trying something new today. Pat gave me the opportunity to lead an episode, which I graciously took. So we're taking this opportunity now to lead a podcast. Pat, how do you feel about that?
I feel great. Maybe taking a little bit of a back seat on this app, just seeing how you operate, seeing what you do with this.
I appreciate that. And, I'm just excited to take this opportunity and kind of run with it. I know a lot of people, when their moment comes, they're not always ready for it and the lights are too bright. But, I just want to kind of take this and see how far it can take me.
When Tom Brady got on the field with sorry, I know you're saying something, but I just wanted to say, when Tom Brady got on the field with Drew Bledsoe, got hurt or taken out or whatever, how he got in, Tom Brady said how he something.
Yes, I believe Tom Brady said, if they let me on the field, they'll never take me off. So, yes, what my co-host is trying to say. Continuing on. So in this episode, we wanted to hit on a few main things, mostly the Hall of Fame game that occurred last Thursday, as well as just some camp updates that have been occurring. We're now about 2 weeks into training camp for the Chicago Bears. So we started to put the pads on, and there's been some new storylines that are developing. So Pat and I just wanted to take this time to kind of go over what's been happening with the Chicago Bears and hit on some breaking news. Pat, how's that sound to you?
Sounds fantastic. I'm ready to get into it.
Hell yeah, brother. All right, let's get into it. So to start with just some breaking news that's occurred around the NFL with more of a Bears tone. First piece of news that we have is Tarik Cohen, former Chicago Bear electric return man, utility player, has officially announced his retirement. I know earlier on this podcast, we had announced him returning to the NFL for the New York Jets, but he recently informed the Jets that he will be retiring, which is sad. It has been a tough journey for him since his plethora of injuries he had. It's sad to see him finally retiring or giving up hanging up the cleats, but doesn't diminish the career that he had for the Bears.
Yeah, Tarik Cohen's 29 years old. I feel like that's outlived the age of a running back, especially a guy like him that relies on his athleticism. So definitely sad, especially when you think about what he did. I've been seeing that clip of Mitch Trubisky taking a knee and Tarik doing a backflip after some game. I think that's 2018 Bears, probably. And that just kind of summarizes who Tarik Cohen was as a player. I'm sure, or what do you think went into that decision? I'm sure he just kind of looked at it on paper and saw he's probably not going to make much of an impact on the field. Probably that juice ain't worth that squeeze, right? And probably just wanted to maybe get out, spend time with people he loves. I think maybe it's admirable to stop when you're not necessarily on top, but when your time is up, instead of, continuing to try to make it work.
I know his decision to return to the NFL, he said that he was getting fat. He got up to 209 pounds, where he usually plays at like 190 or 100, around under 190. So he said he was getting fat, so he wanted to get back into shape, which brought him to the Jets. But I guess I'm not 100% sure. I think it's a personal decision for everybody. So I think his probably had to do something a lot with his injury history, and maybe he just took that in scope. But it was exciting with the kickoff change rules to think that he could make an impact or, have this position that seems really tailored to him. So I feel like this would have been a great opportunity for him.
Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't want to see kind of like a Lev Bell situation where he kind of ends up on the Chiefs, and then suddenly he's boxing, and then now he's like maybe going to box Jake Paul. Did he box? He might have. No, didn't box Jake Paul, but now he's fighting
this
Frank
might be
Gore,
your breaking news.
Or he fought Frank Gore, I thought, and it's just kind of weird.
Just weird.
Maybe he will, but yeah, that's all I got to say on Tarik.
Tarik, hell of a player. Always welcome on the pod, Tarik. If you're Tarik and his team, if you guys are reaching out or listening, feel free to jump on the pod. Next piece of news that we have, DJ Moore, electric receiver, ever heard of him, on the Chicago Bears, recently signed a 4-year, $110 million extension with $82.6 million guaranteed. This makes him the second highest paid receiver in the league, behind Minnesota's Justin Jefferson. Also, ever heard of him? To note, this $82.6 million, I believe A.J. Brown, he signed for $84 million this year, and Justin Jefferson signed for $110 million guaranteed, just to kind of give a scope for it. But $110 million, pretty big contract, but at least in my opinion and the way that it's kind of been interpreted, it's a fairly team-friendly deal considering the future contracts that are going to be coming, especially for CeeDee Lamb, who hasn't signed yet by the Cowboys. CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase, they're inevitable deals that are coming. I think it's ultimately a good deal for Poles to kind of get out ahead of it and to sign more a little earlier, instead of letting, like how the Cowboys are letting the CeeDee Lamb contract kind of sit out in limbo. And I think having him now locked up for a long time, where there's going to be record-setting deals from here on out moving forward, I think it's just good to get him locked up. I think it's a healthy deal for the team that can allow us to grow as well, but also, $110 million, nothing to sniff at. And I think it's exciting overall to get our big-name player signed up for an extended period of time.
That's a good point, Connor. I didn't consider CeeDee Lamb or the Jamar Chase contracts, but I agree that it's important to probably sign a guy like DJ Moore before those guys, because someone, especially like CeeDee Lamb, obviously Jamar Chase too, when those guys get their contracts signed, they're really setting the market or kind of resetting the standard of what a quarterback gets paid or what a receiver gets paid. I remember when Deshaun Watson had his crazy contract, or then even when Christian Kirk had his crazy wide receiver contract, that really shakes up the market, and the people that are late to signing their players now have to pay way more for their players for signing them late. I also think it's just a nice kind of symbol of the change in the Bears culture, where we now have the second highest paid receiver in the league. Like, I think that's pretty exciting to be a Bears fan, having that much of an emphasis on our offense, where for a long time with Khalil Mack or one of our old linemen were like our highest paid players, or like our defensive ends are like our highest paid players. So now having a skill position like DJ Moore, I think it's super exciting.
Yeah, I think it shows a shift in the focus of the team, but also having that backbone of defense, I think, is still present. And I think now this really starts to show the greatness of having a rookie quarterback, because you can give this money to DJ Moore and you can eventually Tevin Jenkins is going to have to be re-signed, and we just re-signed Cole Kmet. You have to at least think about, this is his last year, you have to at least think about what's going to happen with Keenan Allen. Having Caleb Williams for 4 years, or potentially 5 with his option, I think really sets up the team for a lot of growth within the offense. And it just has this huge window where you don't have to pay your quarterback $50 million. You don't have $50 million sunk up in quarterback payroll. So I think this really kind of shows, not to get back into it, but it shows the advantage of having a talented rookie quarterback instead of maybe a guy that you have to sign to an extension.
Another thing I'll say on it is from that report we saw last week, there's some of those weird Caleb Williams takes, in addition to the argument about surrounding him with veterans, whatever. A lot of people are talking about kind of the temporary success that we might have, where you think of Keenan Allen is only signed for 1 year and DJ Moore is up for a contract, and maybe we didn't. Maybe we wouldn't re-sign him. So I think now locking DJ Moore in for 4 more years really sets Caleb Williams up for a prosperous future, and certainly sets a stronger foundation for future success for the Bears.
Did you see DJ Moore was left off the NFL top 100?
I did see that. That was insane. Somebody else, and Jalen Johnson too, right?
Jalen Johnson was also
ridiculous.
Left off. Yeah,
I
don't get it, because the top 100 is voted by players, not writers.
I mean, there's a lot of players in the league. There's a lot of players, but
True.
That's crazy.
I do think the NFL top 100 ends up being just a weird. It does kind of be a weird list, but who am I to say they're the players?
Sure.
They're voting. Yeah. But for Aaron Rodgers to make the list, obviously is great. But Terry McLaurin made the list, and Terry McLaurin, I couldn't think of a single person who would take Terry McLaurin over DJ Moore if they're picking a receiver, right? Like Tariq Woolen was on the list over Jalen Johnson. Yeah. Like Jalen Ramsey was still on the list. I think there's so much of a Bears tax that is like, that is such an old guard. Say if Jalen Johnson was on the Cowboys, or if Jalen Johnson was on the Ravens, he would 100% be a top 50 player on that list. It was nice, though, to see Keenan Allen. Like, Keenan Allen was the 51st ranked player on that list. And Keenan Allen, great receiver, but there's no way that Keenan Allen can land on 51 in that list and DJ Moore can't make the 100, right?
No, that's insane. Yeah, that's wow. That is news to me. I mean, I knew DJ Moore and
Jalen Johnson.
I knew those two were not on the list, but you naming some of those names that people that
Mhm.
did make it. I mean, where did Aaron Rodgers come in at?
I think somewhere in the 90s.
That's
So I think
ridiculous.
later, but
Oh my God, DK Metcalf. I mean, okay. I would also say DJ Moore had a way better year than DK Metcalf. That is
whatever. PFF, I know everyone says it's not everything, but PFF is something. Jalen Johnson was the number 1 overall PFF cornerback last year, and DJ Moore was the number 10 PFF ranked receiver last year. The disrespect around this league is a lot for the Bears, and I think it just never ends. If Keenan Allen had that season last year on the Bears, I don't know if he'd be 51. Maybe it's weird giving a 7-win team that good of players, but okay, we can move on. DJ Moore extended, big money, but maybe not the biggest money. Could set up for future offensive moves. Other news that have come around the league, Matt Judon, who is a defensive end for the Patriots. Great defensive end for the Patriots. He did return to practice, and this is notable because there had been contract negotiations brewing in Patriots camp around Matt Judon. He had been sitting out practice for a while, but he had talks with Jared Mayo recently at practice and returned to practice. Matt Judon would fit in perfectly as the edge rusher across from Montez Sweat in our defense. So that was kind of the thinking that has been occurring for these last 2 weeks, that maybe Matt Judon is on the table for the trade block, who would complement and just add to this pass rush so brilliantly. He would really complete this defense if we were to get him. But he did return to practice, so he has ended his practice holdout. There has not been a contract signed yet, so we'll see it. That might be something to monitor, but Matt Judon did return to practice for the Patriots.
This was news to me. I guess we'll get to it a little bit later, but after watching the Hall of Fame game with Austin Booker, I definitely don't think our defensive end problem is solved yet. Not to say that Austin Booker won't grow into something great, but I think to start the season, he's still got a lot of work to do. So to get a guy like that would be a huge, huge addition. So I'm curious. So the contract is not finished yet, right? So is there still kind of like an open window, maybe that things might not work out? Or do you think now that he's back, they'll probably figure it out?
I mean, look, until a contract is signed, who knows? I do think him returning to practice does make it seem like it's heading in the right direction or in a better direction than it was. Mm-hmm. But I mean, until a contract has been signed, who knows?
Yeah, I guess we'll wait and see.
Yeah. So the next piece of news, the first episode for Hard Knocks Chicago Bears is premiering on Tuesday on HBO. Not a sponsor. Would love to be a sponsor. But Hard Knocks will be playing first episode on Tuesday, which is super exciting. The trailer dropped about a week ago on Twitter, which was pretty, shockwaves through the internet, run through a brick wall. Very exciting. But yeah, going to get to see the first episode of Hard Knocks on Tuesday. It's going to be super cool to see a lot of an inside look into training camp, hear about some of these storylines, hear about the bubble players on the roster, and, most importantly, hear about these rookies that we got coming in. I think that's what we're all looking forward to the most. But yeah, Hard Knocks premiering on Tuesday.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I think I'm looking forward to seeing how that wide receiver duo interacts with each other. Interested to see how Rome interacts.
Trio.
What did I say? Duo?
You said duo.
Oh, duo. Trio. My bad. Apologies. See how that wide receiver trio behaves together. Seeing how the young rookie Rome Odunze behaves with DJ Moore, and then the ultra veteran Keenan Allen. DJ Moore is kind of always funny in any interview I see him. He's always kind of got this shy little smile.
He's always smiling, yeah.
Yeah, a little coy smile.
Little coy boy.
Yeah, I'm sure a guy like that probably won't be a huge focus on Hard Knocks, but certainly Odunze probably will. So maybe we'll get to see a little sneak peek of that, but certainly excited.
Inject Bears content into my vein. Okay, last piece of news that I think we should at least talk about.
Yes.
Now, Justin Fields. And now, to back up, fans of the podcast will remember we had an episode earlier where Patrick, myself, and a friend, DJ Almada, made some bold predictions about the upcoming season. And one of my bold predictions was Justin Fields would play, I don't remember the exact specifics, but it was basically Justin Fields would play a lot of games for the Steelers this season. It was hinting that Justin Fields would kind of be the starter for the Steelers. And now there has been a lot of buzz about Justin Fields in camp. It's mainly because Russell Wilson has not played the first week because he has a calf strain, but that has not stopped the Justin Fields hype train from leaving the station and filling Twitter with clips of him throwing however slow the release is, touchdowns to George Pickens and running for touchdowns. So yeah, Justin Fields has definitely been making a lot of camp buzz, or at least beat reporter camp buzz about his playing and during camp. My take is that it's a lot of coach speak. There's not a lot to talk about right now. Every quarterback right now, every rookie quarterback and most starting quarterbacks are having great pieces written about them. And I don't think you can really take away or make a note about what Justin Fields' game looks like until he plays a regular season game. Everyone can look great in preseason. Justin Fields always, I feel like, had positive spins throughout the season. And even in preseason games last year, he looked awesome. But until Justin Fields has that first game against silly steps on the field for the first time and is really reading live defenses, I feel like you can't make a decision. But I will just say it's exciting to think about Justin Fields finding a different home and leading. I think that there's a huge pendulum swing with Justin Fields of not being excited for him or not wanting to see him succeed or just being very negative. Now that we're on Caleb's side, to be forgetting Justin Fields and moving completely away. But I do think that Justin Fields, at the end of the day, somebody that we all enjoyed or were excited about and did enjoy watching at certain points. And I think a lot of us, you and me both, want to see him succeed. So if he could find success in Pittsburgh, that would be awesome. And especially for the Bears, considering that if Justin Fields plays more than 51% of snaps for the Steelers, our 6th round pick that we traded for him will be upgraded to a 4th round pick. So from both a personal and a Bears perspective, Justin Fields' success would be something that we're looking forward to. So I think this storyline is exciting. I do think that it's being overblown because of, one, the fact that Russell Wilson can't step on the field right now. So of course Fields is taking the first team snaps, and Fields is talented. So I think talent can show through a lot in camp that doesn't necessarily show through in the regular season. But I think it's news nonetheless. Pat, you want to hit on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you made a lot of really great points there. I think just to start, I think it would be strange for me personally if I was reading articles that was like, Pat Mahomes looks awesome in training camp, or like Josh Allen looks amazing in training camp. It's like, who cares? It's training camp, right? Like you said, they're playing against 2nd and 3rd string players, sometimes the first team defense. And I'm sure they have good days and bad days, but it's really hard to say what they're actually going to be like when they step on the field. I'll say I saw couple clips of Justin Fields. I saw one clip of a 10-yard out to George Pickens that, looked pretty good, looked like good ball placement. But yeah, I think to your point, I think a lot of people that are on Team Caleb, now that we've drafted Caleb Williams and gotten rid of Fields, they want to have this validation where they see just Justin Fields crash and burn, and they want to see him become an absolute disaster,
exactly.
Which I think is pretty sad. And I feel like not the culture we want as Bears fans, where we I feel like
so jaded.
The idea is that we take in people and we fall in love with these players. Like Tariq Cohen, like someone like Tariq Cohen. We love him for even when he's on the Jets. We love what he did for the team, right? And I think to have this weird negative relationship with Justin Fields, who certainly had his ups and downs with the media and then also with on the field play, but I think to want him to see his downfall, I think is a really sad narrative to try to spread and a weird thing to want.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to see Justin Fields do awesome. I wouldn't want to see him beat the Bears, obviously, but
True.
If he could become a dominant player in the NFL, well, I guess that'd be interesting because then I can only imagine the graphics that the Bears would receive.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, the amount of crap we would get for that. But, I think I'd be willing to suffer that if it means Justin Fields still has a successful NFL career.
Yeah, and I think Caleb Williams and Justin Fields, different conferences, both could be success stories. I think that's very true. So I think there's two different arguments to be made of saying, I would love to see Justin Fields do great and succeed. Now, at the end of the day, in my heart of hearts, do I think that Justin Fields will succeed? That is a different point. And I don't know if I'm ready to declare that he has changed fundamentally as a quarterback and that this is the Justin Fields takeover season, which Ryan Clark, former Steelers player, famously not a big Bears guy, big anti-Caleb Williams guy, I feel like, said that Justin Fields will lead the Steelers to the playoffs. I think that's an interesting take to have. I know Mike Tomlin has Fields competitive teams always. Recently, he hasn't fielded a lot of good teams. He's fielded a lot of playoff teams, and I think that's a difference between having a good team and a playoff team. If you, being a Bulls fan, right, you know that there's a huge difference between having a playoff team and a good team. So I think... Sure, Justin Fields could lead the Steelers to the playoffs. And I think we talked about this last year. We thought that Justin Fields could lead the Bears to the playoffs this year. Did I think that Justin Fields could win a Super Bowl with the Bears? No, I think that was a different debate. And that's ultimately why we thought it was a good idea to move on from him. So I think where Justin Fields will go, I don't know if he's had that growth yet. And I think it remains to be seen the kind of actual growth that he's come through. But it'll be something to monitor to see in preseason once Russell Wilson comes back, how that QB1 battle plays out in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I just say one more thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
I saw Mike Tomlin mention on a news reporter was asking him about Justin Fields' development and kind of touching on the success that he's been having during the training camp. And Mike Tomlin made a point of saying he's really emphasizing Fields to trust his own natural instincts and trust his own talent, focusing more on his ability to run and escape, get out of tough situations, and use his legs. Where I feel like last year we were maybe trying to build an offense not around Fields. We were trying to make an offense and then force Fields to fit into it. So it would be interesting to see how Fields does. Hopefully maybe in an offense that is certainly a more run-heavy offense, and certainly I think could be built more around Fields and encourages that type of running. It's interesting, though, because I feel like Fields' game in college wasn't all, like, he threw the ball a ton, right? And I feel like it's his
he was a
natural-
throw-first quarterback for sure.
Yeah. So it's funny that now, 3 years in, his natural instincts and talents have become being a runner. So I wonder if that'll be good for his development as a long-term quarterback, but we'll see.
Well, certainly different talent landscape playing on Ohio State with JSN, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and probably the best line in the country versus the Bears, but definitely was a pass first guy, and he would launch the ball, and I think he's had to rely on his legs for a multitude of reasons from a talent perspective in Chicago and his own personal quarterback abilities. But I think overall interesting to monitor to see where Justin Fields will go. I think Mike Tomlin's a good coach. I think he'll be able to figure out the best foot forward. Arthur Smith is definitely a run-first guy, former OC for the Titans with Derrick Henry in their playoff seasons and former head coach for the Falcons. So I think he'll find a way to get Justin Fields on the field. So interesting to see how that plays out. But moving on, for those of you who were not paying attention, the NFL season kicked off officially on Thursday. And kicked off in a little bit of a different manner. We'll get to that later. But there was the Hall of Fame game in Canton, Ohio on Thursday. During that ceremony, this is where the upcoming class for the Hall of Fame is inducted. Notably for the Bears, Devin Hester, Steve McMichael, and Julius Peppers were all inducted to the Hall of Fame. So we got to see some great speeches. Devin Hester had a great speech about finding his calling as being a kick returner. Stephen McMichael had a really great ceremony. His former teammates all came to his house because Steve McMichael is battling ALS, came to celebrate his induction into the Hall of Fame, which is really great to see. And Julius Peppers as well. Even though Julius Peppers' career was predominantly with the Panthers, still great to see 3 Bears players make it to the Hall of Fame.
Peppers played for 8
years with the Panthers, right?
Yeah, Julius Peppers played for 8 years for the Panthers and then 4 years with the Bears and then concluded his career with 2 more years with the Panthers. So certainly a Panther, but he still shouted out the Bears in his Hall of Fame speech. He gave a good bear down, which is nice to see. Yeah, I think it's great to see Devin Hester making the Hall of Fame. He seems super emotional. I saw this interview he gave where he talked about his relationship with Lovie Smith. He talked about how close the two of them were together, how much of a bond that they had. And just I feel like seeing the excitement around Hester getting inducted and seeing all of the memories of the type of player he was and what he could do on the field and how electric and exciting he was. Everyone brings up the Super Bowl kick return and just what he could do to a team. I mean, truly, we've never seen anything like it. And he's really defined the position, and pretty great to see somebody like that getting recognized.
Well, it's so cool that a player like Hester, who stat book wise, he probably had, I think his record was 21 touchdowns, maybe return touchdowns or around that, right? A receiver having 21 touchdowns is not notable, right? It's really cool to just see the NFL recognize solely his impact on the field that can't really be put into stats.
Right.
I feel like his career as a receiver, he's a good receiver, but obviously not a Hall of Fame receiver. To just see the NFL or committee or whatever, Hall of Fame, to recognize him as his impact and the fear that he created on the field and just how dynamic of a player he was, I feel like is really cool. And maybe it'll change in the future how certain players are looked at. I know that like punters and kickers aren't really recognized in the Hall of Fame as well. Maybe getting less traditional placements in the Hall of Fame, I think would be interesting as well. But yeah, super exciting to see Hester there. He was a guy who was long overdue to make the Hall of Fame. There was this hesitation to put him in the Hall of Fame because of his scope of his impact of only being a kick returner, right? But it's cool to see a change in perception of Hall of Fame to put him there. And he had a cool bust as well. I feel like often Hall of Fame busts can look pretty bad, but he had a nice looking bust as well. Moving on, we had the Hall of Fame game. This is the first official game of the NFL season. It is often not a very exciting game because none of the starters typically play for either team. Last year, I don't think any starters really played. This year, the starters were Cairo Santos and Kaimi Fairbairn. So those were some of the starters. I guess Khalil Herbert also played if he's considered an adjacent starter. And Austin Booker played as well. But, overall, not a lot of starters playing. Most of the starters for the team are not even in pads. Jaquan Brisker and Caleb Williams were not even suited up for the game. So it's a pretty low stakes game. It's so low stakes that this counts as an additional preseason game for both of these teams because the risk and load that it puts on the team is so little that they can still play 3 other preseason games. But it's still interesting. You've had this break from football for so long. Your arms and hands are starting to shake because you're missing football. So seeing people running around in jerseys on the football field, regardless of the quality, is still super exciting. And there's still some takeaways to make from the game. To start, the opening drive was taken by Tyson Bagent, and Davis Mills took the opening drive for the Texans. But then afterwards, Brett Rippon was the main quarterback for the Chicago Bears. So Brett Rippon, undrafted out of college. He spent last season with, I believe, the Broncos and the Seahawks and maybe the Rams. He's a journeyman quarterback, but yesterday Brett Rippon was ripping the ball down the field, threw for 166 and 3 touchdowns. Show notes says, honestly, looked pretty good, looked pretty solid. And yeah, I feel like he played pretty solid. But the main highlight from this game has to be Collin Johnson, the 6'6" receiver out of Texas. This is his 3rd year and 3rd team in the NFL, but he had 3 catches for 56 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had a great game and notably a highlight catch down the sideline. He had a jump ball catch where he came up and had all 6'6" of his frame on display. So Collin Johnson, I think, will be a focal point in Hard Knocks. Super interesting to follow. But Collin Johnson, I feel like, is the main takeaway from this game. Definitely showed up the most on the field and the film. So yeah, Collin Johnson had an electric game, and I think it'll be interesting to see if he ends up getting a roster spot on the team, especially with this loaded receiver room and Tyler Scott, Velus Jones, seeing how this kind of all plays out with the receiving room.
Yeah, so just some of my quick takeaways from the Hall of Fame game. First off, I know Caleb Williams is not suited up for the game, but he did practice in pads, and getting to see him in a Bears uniform compared to what he looked like during that first rookies, try on your jerseys and do photo shoots, he looked way drippier today. I don't know what it was. I think it was not having leg sleeves on or having an oversized shirt. I don't know. Something about it, it clicked better than last time, which is great to see. I had concerns seeing that first photo shoot. Williams' body, he just looked kind of strange. He looked weird in some parts. The leggings didn't look right. So I think it looked more like the USC Williams. But maybe, Connor, you're saying that you didn't like that to begin with.
I think I just need to go
him
adjust
growing out his hair. I think him growing out his hair, he's going to start using a headband. I think that has potential to be something cool. Okay.
But I think Caleb Williams is a very cool guy. He has a lot of definition. Yeah, right. He's got a lot of swag. His draft day outfit was insane. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. But honestly, yeah, it doesn't really matter if he just has to throw the ball and run the ball. He has to be a great quarterback, not be a great fashionista or whatever.
Looking quarterback.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely. I think it was funny also that, Connor, you mentioned how insignificant of a game it is that it's added as an additional game. It's also insignificant that when there's a rain delay, they just call the game off.
As if it's a t-ball game in your backyard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the parents don't want to get wet.
we're done. We get the gist. We see where this game's going. They just called it. I thought that was so funny.
Yeah.
It was so funny. But another player that I was looking out for at the Hall of Fame game, and I watched some highlights this morning, was Austin Booker, our defensive end that we just drafted out of Kansas, who I believe was our fourth or fifth round pick.
Yes.
Fifth round pick, right? And he is supposed to be the complement to Montez Sweat, who's our dominant defensive end. There's a lot of question marks around him about, can he become a defensive end that is an NFL starter? He's got a big frame, but not a lot packed onto it. A little bit of a skinnier guy, more like a Leonard Floyd type. A little throwback.
I was kind of looking at that too. I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah, it was exciting to see him out on the field on Thursday. I will say, obviously, I don't know much about defensive end scouting. I don't know much to look for, but my first reaction was it looked a little slow off the line.
Oh, really?
That's what I would say. Now, obviously,
is this had a sack just from watching the game, or is this your post-game film review that you came up with this?
This was me watching every snap. Watching a YouTube breakdown of every snap. Now, the breakdown didn't give their own opinion. This is just my own opinion. So he appeared slow off the line. He got a sack, which is great. Had a forced fumble.
That's great.
And if you get a sack every game and you're a little slow off the line, who cares, right? Sorry, if you get a sack, that's awesome. But, still seems a little bit of a raw talent. Connor, you mentioned still needs to work on stopping that run. Did see his first play. He really just kind of bull rushed his lineman and knocked him over, had him falling. So that was good to see. But a little slow off the line, but good to see him get a sack.
So Ahmed Gaji did not play. Williams did not play. Odunze did not play. Torrey Taylor did not play. Austin Booker was the main highlight that we had in terms of rookies playing in this game. And I think overall, he still shows that he is a rush specialist. He was mostly focused on pass rush situations like 1st and 19, 3rd and 22, I believe. So a lot of those situations is where he shined the most. He definitely still has to work on his run defense, being not a liability in the run game, which I think will come. But yeah, overall, he had a lot of battles with Blake Fisher, who is the left tackle for the Texans. And I think overall, I was encouraged with how he played. I think he did have some reps where he did look like he was exploding off the line and timing the snap well. But I do agree with your point, Pat. And I think he did show good displays of having plans as a defensive end, having a rush plan for how he moves and being adaptive in his plans as well. There are a couple of good schemes that the Bears had him on where you could see how he was beating his man, even if the scheme wasn't working, and being creative as an edge rusher. So I think overall encouraging. I think it also showed that maybe he's not ready to be the de facto solution for the Bears. I don't think that this position is solved yet, but I think an encouraging start overall for Austin Booker. Other notable players who played included Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson. Khalil Herbert played pretty well. He had a good, solid run. Roschon Johnson, I think, was competent as well. I will say Khalil Herbert feels overqualified to be playing in this game. I don't know what I would equate it to, but it's kind of like Doug McDermott playing in Summer League in year 2, or I don't know. Khalil Herbert seems like he's played too many real snaps of the NFL football and too many meaningful snaps to be playing in the Hall of Fame game. So he obviously looked okay and pretty good because was basically a starter last year, and I think Roschon Johnson looked fine as well. But I think Khalil Herbert still is in an interesting situation on this team because I feel like his fit on the team, I feel like, has been called into question now because we gave DeAndre Swift starter money, a big bag of money right out of the gate. We just drafted Roschon Johnson, so I feel like our commitment is greater to Roschon right now. Travis Homer, I feel like fits into this roster just from a special teams perspective, and Kareem Blasingame is still on the roster as well. I think he fits the team, just his role I feel like he fills well.
Yeah, we got a lot of running backs.
So rostering 5 running backs seems strange, and I feel like Khalil Herbert doesn't have that impact on special teams in the same way that Homer or Blasingame has, and didn't get the money, doesn't have the same commitment as Swift or Roschon. So I feel like Herbert, it'll be interesting to see how his roster spot comes about through training camp, because I feel like he could be a candidate to be cut or traded at the end of camp. I just think it'll be interesting to see how this running back room shapes up throughout the offseason. Finally, the last thing that I think to note for the Hall of Fame game was the new kickoff rule. So this is the debut of the new kickoff rule for the NFL, where the return and the kickoff team now start 5 yards apart from each other. The kicker kicks the ball from the 35-yard line, so is the only player down there kicking the ball. And play only starts when the returner actually catches the ball. So this totally changes the dynamic of the return. It is supposed to take away a lot of the physicality and a lot of the speed, or at least the dangerous speed, out of the kickoff. It's supposed to emulate what was done in the, I believe, XFL, the kickoff strategy or kickoff rules that they had there. But it was really interesting to see the debut of this kickoff rule here. There wasn't anything too notable about, there were no like returns that happened, but I believe there's a touchback there where the ball does start at the 30-yard line, which is different than the 25-yard line before. But we did see a lot of returns that ended up happening. And I think it's just interesting to see how this rule change has promoted a lot more returns already. I think there's still a lot of rules that need to be figured out, a lot of intricacies to be figured out, but the debut of the new kickoff rule was fun to watch.
I agree. I think if you want a sport like football to stay around, you got to start making it a little bit safer. Like, especially the kickoff, where you have everyone sprinting at each other full speed. You're just asking to get hurt. So I think this is a great opportunity to make the game, for one, more exciting by giving the returner a bigger advantage. I think him starting with getting more speed and everyone else being a little bit slower, but also making the game safer. I think it's a great move. It'd be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's a fine line between physicality and football, because at the end of the day, it is football. And I think it's interesting to try to take away the physicality of it. But I think the kickoff is a perfect place to try to reduce the dangerousness or the physicality there, because it seems needlessly dangerous to just have, there's no other play in football where you have that, maybe besides punt returning, just where you have so much opportunity to gain speed and then hit somebody. I feel like there's no other play in football, another chance at football that looks quite like it. So I think trying to reduce it to look more like an actual traditional offensive and defensive play, I think is better for the longevity of the game. And I think, like you said, I think it's more fun. I think having more returns, more opportunity to return and have stuff break, I think is always a good thing. So that's, I feel like, all we got to talk about with the Hall of Fame game. I think the main thing is that it's the Hall of Fame game. Not a lot of starters are playing. They literally only played 3/4 of it, so it's hard to draw a lot of takeaways. But the main thing is football is back, baby, and it's exciting to watch Bears football especially come back, see those blue uniforms come out, see players at least on the sideline or on the field. It's exciting time to have football finally back. But moving on, we are now about 2 weeks into Bears training camp. Last week, we got to talk to friend of the pod and recurring guest Kevin Donahue about his experience at training camp, or his ticket situation to training camp, where he talked to George McCaskey. McCaskey still has not agreed to come on to the pod, but I think that's in the works right now. But training camp has been going on right now. We are currently, I believe the most recent day was day 11 of training camp. So our next preseason game that we have is against the Buffalo Bills, who I believe will have Mitch Trubisky playing quarterback, something to keep your eyes on. But from day 11, Kyler Gordon and Nate Davis are both out still. Nate Davis especially has been dealing with staying on the field issues seemingly since he's been signed by the Bears, whether it's physical injuries or off the field priorities. And Kyler Gordon's also out right now for a couple practices. So injuries have kind of been a theme, but training camp has started. There's some takeaways that we can make from it. And yeah, it's an exciting time. So to start, Caleb Williams, who is probably the most interesting person to look at for training camp, probably the guy that we all care about, right? I think camp has gone about what you would expect. I think there's been a lot of goods, been a lot of bads as well. I think first team reps, not like Drake May or JJ McCarthy, or spending a lot of the time against the twos. Caleb Williams has been thrown in with the ones, and the ones in this case is a good, great, talented Bears defense that he's going against every day. So I think it's to be expected that he would struggle early on, but I think there's been great moments for Caleb Williams as well, and bad moments, which is to be expected. There has been this reoccurring issue that I've noticed with batted balls at the line of scrimmage, which is both a positive for the defense that we're getting the hand on the ball, but also a negative for Caleb Williams that just his release angle or his release of the ball might be too low. I know that this was something that the Bears ended up starting to work on, where they would have equipment managers or equipment people for the team holding pads up at the line as like a 12th defender, where they would hold blocking pads up so that he would have to release the ball higher, which is kind of cool to see us changing our recognizing a problem and then implementing a change to fix it. That's kind of cool. But I think overall, Caleb Williams has had a sharp camp. I think he's had a good, solid camp, a lot of growth. I think in all the press conferences that he's had, he's shown his maturity already as a leader. Kevin Byard had a story about Caleb Williams talking about essentially cleaning up the locker room and taking the work off the janitors, which can sometimes be a red flag. We saw that last year with Collin Johnson picking up the water bottles. And you can often think of, oh, who is this rookie coming in and trying to tell the veterans to essentially pick up after themselves. But I think it's a cool thing to see. Not only Kevin Byard seemed to respect it or notice it as something that was commendable, but also to show Caleb Williams' leadership. I know Ed Reed had this talk where he talked about players not picking up their towels before their Super Bowl season and saying, how are we supposed to win a championship if we can't even pick up our own towels? So I think there is a place for this kind of talk. And I think it shows Caleb Williams' willingness to be a leader. And I think it's something that's exciting.
I saw your tweet or your quote tweet on somebody's take on the water bottle thing about talking about how Caleb Williams should know his role. And if he's the rookie, he should be the guy picking up the water bottles. I think it's just such a lame... That's such a lame. I feel like that's such a lame take. I guess it's a little bit different when it's like the backup running back doing it and being like, "Hey guys, come on, do this." But if it's like the quarterback, it's like, okay, quarterback is supposed to be the leader.
Exactly.
That is leadership stuff. Also, like, I think it's kind of weird. They're all grown adults that still don't like throw out their water bottles and like, I don't know. I feel like that's. I don't know much about the NFL players and their cleaning habits, but that's kind of a weird thing that they still like don't throw out their own water bottles. Like
grown ass men, man. Yeah,
it's like you're grown men. I don't get why that's such a big deal. But yeah, regardless, I've been seeing a lot of good buzz about Caleb Williams. I feel like last week it was like the first 3 or 4 days of the week were going well. The Thursday or Friday game practice where they did red zone, Caleb Williams struggled a lot. So, you kind of see 2 or 3 steps forward, 1 or 2 steps back. But like you said, Connor, compared to someone like JJ McCarthy, who's playing behind a Sam Darnold, or Drake May, who's playing behind Jacoby Brissett, right?
Probably Joe Milton, maybe, but...
Yeah, and potentially Joe Milton, where those guys are playing against the second team defense. I think Caleb Williams playing the first team defense hopefully will do good for him. I think that you can make arguments both directions that maybe that won't be good for his development, but I guess we'll see where he ends up. I think it's nice to see that he is still making plays against a formidable defense. I would just say real quick, we don't have to cover it too much, but I've been seeing good stuff. I've been seeing okay stuff about JJ McCarthy. I've been seeing good stuff about Jane Daniels. The Drake May situation, I think, should have Patriots fans seriously
terrified.
Holy cow. First of all, they have like 5 quarterbacks in New England right now. They have Milton, Drake May, and Brissett, 3 quarterbacks. And from training camp buzz, Joe Milton, the rookie quarterback, 6th round pick out of Tennessee, who I think is 6'5", 250.
He's
like an absolute alpha male. He has been stealing the show of training camp, and Drake May seems to just be kind of this disappointing, doesn't seem to be the Justin Herbert or Joe Burrow that he's been compared to. But if I'm investing the 3rd overall pick when I could have had Marvin Harrison and maybe could have drafted Joe Milton in the 6th round and he still be good, I would be a little bit concerned, a little bit worried about that.
And I guess if you hit on the quarterback regardless, it's fine. But yeah, that's a great point. If you could have had Marvin Harrison, I think in Williams' case, I think in Daniel's case, I think in May's case, training camp is a great time to start making conclusions and start making points. But I think at the end of the day, you just got to see these guys on the field playing real live football. Jamar Chase had a terrible training camp when he came onto the Bengals. Everyone was on him about he hasn't been playing football for a year. He was having serious drops. He was complaining about not having stripes on the football anymore and how that was hard to see. And then he came out and had one of the best rookie seasons of a receiver ever has, right? I think, sure, most people receive great buzz in camp, and it's weird now to be seeing Drake May get terrible buzz, but I think you just got to wait till he sees it on the field. I think you need to wait until he starts playing real snaps to draw any serious serious conclusions, wide sweeping conclusions. Let's wait to see what the kid has, right? Continuing on. Yeah, another theme that has been coming around has been injuries. Nate Davis is out as always because Nate Davis he just isn't really on the field ever in any facet.
It's just not really his thing. Yeah.
Just not being healthy or being available is not really his thing. Darnell Wright also had a period where he wasn't seen at practice. And Flus is kind of, I remember he made a comment recently about talking about how availability is the best ability, kind of hinting at a lot of these players need to be on the field, and they're not right now. There's Jaquan Brisker has been out, Kyler Gordon's been out, Sweat's been out, Edmonds been out, Billings has had periods where he's been out, and a lot of like training camp is training camp. Veterans take time off, same way during the season where veterans just take time off. Honestly, like Montez Sweat, there's not a lot that he needs to prove at training camp, so it's fine if he's not there sometimes. But I think injuries have been a concern, especially for positions that are totally not solidified, like Nate Davis's position with Ryan Bates and whoever else is trying to play there. I think it would be nice to see those people on the field and competing, or Kieran Amgaje, like seeing him on the field. So I think injuries are, again, something that's concerning. I assume all teams are facing injuries, though, so it's something to monitor. But yeah, the next player, and we hinted on him earlier, I think is the most encouraging, is just Collin Johnson. I think we hit on him a little bit, or we hit on him before. He was the star of the Hall of Fame game. But I think Collin Johnson making the roster would be so interesting for the Bears, especially with all the attention that has come from the trio of receivers that we have acquired. The trio of receivers that we now possess in DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Rome Odunze. It's interesting to think about Collin Johnson, who has been somewhat of a journeyman in his early 3-year career to make this team, but he's the tallest receiver in the NFL at 6'6". He's a huge body and provides definitely a different receiver build than what we typically have, right? Velas and Tyler Scott and some of these players, Dante Pettis, some of these people who might be in position for that 4th or 5th receiver slot. It'd be nice to have somebody who profiles as just this really big-bodied receiver that provides a different dynamic at receiver. So I think Collin Johnson will be interesting to follow during Hard Knocks, especially. I think he'll be somebody who's a focal point, especially after the Hall of Fame game. One of the training camp darlings that we've had so far.
I think it'd be great to have, especially maybe now that Keenan Allen might leave after next year. Maybe getting a solid receiver would be exciting to kind of lock him in.
Yeah, so moving on, there's been a couple other standouts that we want to talk about, mostly Tyler Scott and Torrey Taylor. Pat, you want to take it away?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Connor, like you kind of hit on with Collin Johnson, where we have this dynamic trio of receivers, it's interesting to see who will fill that spot for the 4th receiver, which, I think it's a conversation on its own that we even have a conversation of like, ooh, who's going to be the 4th receiver? Yeah. It's like, who's going to be the 2nd quarterback? It's like,
usually it's like, who's our first receiver that we're going to have?
Yeah. In years past, it's like, God, we have Darnell Mooney and then, oh, okay, well, let's just not throw the ball. So it's nice to see Tyler Scott, 2nd year, like you said, Connor, out of Cincinnati, that he's kind of made an impact early in training camp and has seemingly made a good connection with Caleb Williams early, which I think is very exciting. Again, like I said before, Keenan Allen's potentially gone after this year. It'd be nice to see more young receiver core. But I've seen a lot of training camp clips of him catching some deep balls, getting behind the defense, and being kind of a deep threat or making an impact early. And then also, next player that Connor mentioned is Torrey Taylor, who was our 4th round pick out of Iowa. A little bit of a controversial pick, taking a punter with the 4th round pick, not 4th overall. That'd be very controversial. 4th round pick. But I mean, literally everything I've been seeing about him at camp has just been how much of a monster of a leg this guy has. Literally every punt you see of him, it's just a boom. This guy has an absolute stick of dynamite on his leg and nukes every ball. Connor, you have a point about DeAndre Carter talking about spin of ball.
Yeah, so Carter is the presumed starter at punt returner right now. So he was a return guy for the Chargers last year. Adam Hogue asked him a question about what it's like catching a Torrey Taylor punt. He gave a much more in-depth answer than I was expecting, where he talked about the spin of the punt, and I'm going to butcher it now, but he talked about how Torrey's punt has somewhat of a curve that is not expected, that he had to adjust to early on, where he said, after you see it a couple times, you expect it, but it's something that's different than what you're typically used to. I don't know if this is an advantage or something that he does on purpose, but I could see maybe becoming an issue for returners in games. The first time they see a Tory Taylor punt, maybe they drop it or something, or I don't know. It was just interesting to see DeAndre Carter talk about the science behind kick returning or punt returning. But to your point, yeah, I feel like Taylor's been mashing the ball. There was one where a camp report, the Bears were punting from the 15, him punting the ball, so if they're snapping it from the 15, he is not punting it from the 15. He's probably punting it from the 5. And the punt returner catching the ball at the other 30, which is a humongous punt to see.
Oh my God.
That's insane, right? I think the punt before that, he punted it and it didn't make it to their own 40. So he punted it less than 35 yards, which is not great. So, some ups and downs, but to have the leg there to put it at the other 30 is pretty bonkers. So I think overall, Tory Taylor, I'm going to say it, he's the GOAT. He's the GOAT at punter. He's the greatest of all time, or he's going to be the greatest of all time. Just say it. But I think it'll be cool to see, I don't know, an impact punter. I didn't know that Pat O'Donnell had the nickname of Puntatron, or no, Mega Punt. I didn't know that was his nickname, but on doing some Tory Taylor research, he had that nickname. So it'll be interesting to see if he can become the best Bears punter that we've had since Pat O'Donnell, even though I don't think Pat O'Donnell is that great. But
now, Connor, interesting you said DeAndre Carter is the presumed punt return starter. So is that saying Dante Pettis will not be the starter even after he dropped the punt in the Hall of Fame game?
So I would say, yeah, him dropping the punt at the Hall of Fame game sets him behind.
Cuts him out of the conversation. That kind of puts him back a couple spots.
Yeah, it kind of cuts him out of the starting lineup. That's what I'd say. That's not what you need to do, especially in a meaningless game like the Hall of Fame game. You kind of just got to do your job. And I think dropping the punt is not what you got to do. Oh my God. Dante Pettis has had, since the Niners, he's had so many instances of, oh man, wow, Dante Pettis is in and he's on special teams. Like, all right, I guess that's fine. And then he just beefs up and now it's like, oh, what are you doing?
Yeah. Well, Dante, for listening, we hope you use this as motivation to hold on to those punts. You just got to look it in all the way.
Keep your eyes on the ball. 2 hands.
Eyes on the ball. Yeah.
Well, if you need some guys to throw you some pop-ups or something, politely bang my line. But moving on, unless, Pat, you have more special teams updates.
No, Connor, I was gonna set you up for the Javon Dexter talk. Now, I don't know too much about Javon Dexter's camp buzz. The only thing that I know, and honestly, the only thing that I've been seeing, like other than Caleb Williams news, is the body transformation that Javon Dexter has been having. Is insane. Yes. And I forgot, was Javon Dexter the same guy that last year they made buzz about him accidentally doing the wide receiver? Or was that
no, that was Darnell Wright.
Was that Darnell Wright?
That was Darnell Wright. Yeah.
I don't know why the Bears, we are so willing to let our players do drills of just go out of. It just seems like we're almost encouraging this at this point. Yeah. It's just like,
yeah, I don't know if Darnell Wright was like catching passes from Fields or was like working out with the receivers, or he just in his own time was doing the receiver workout. But it seems somewhat alarming that Darnell Wright didn't notice that the requirements seemed out of his reach as a 300-pound lineman. But regardless, Javon Dexter has had
running in this workout.
I don't need these hands. What's going on?
Catching a lot of balls. I don't know what's the deal.
What's going on? But Javon Dexter, I wrote an article earlier in the season about this, but he's been very motivated to have a breakout season, and part of that came with a body transformation that he's had. He's slimmed down a lot, put on a lot of muscle while losing a lot of fat. Yes. He's had a body transformation. Yes. Where he's lost weight but gained muscle, kind of that perfect balance of getting slimmer but more jacked. But yeah, I think he's had a great camp so far. He's kind of one of the main talking points for beat reporters. They love mentioning how he's been pulling up plays and just looking dynamite overall. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see his actual presence that he has in this team. The 3 technique is super important for the Flus defense, so it'll be cool to see Javon Dexter really step in and start dominating, or hopefully dominate, to finally fill up that middle of our defensive line, or really just complete our defensive, not even complete our defensive line, help our defensive line. Our defensive line is not very good besides Montez Sweat, so to have somebody besides him and Sweat and Billings be good would be great. But yeah, to note, all I've been hearing about is how yoked this guy is now. So it'll be interesting to see how yoked he really is, or how that yokage helps him out on the field.
That seems more in line with a Aaron Donald kind of build, right? Where he's not this huge. I mean, Aaron Donald was humongous, right? Super jacked, but like not super tall and like not.
I mean, he's not 400 pounds, right? Yeah.
Yeah, not 400 pounds, right? So maybe having a 3 technique that's a little bit more elusive will be dangerous. We'll see.
Oh, to your point, Pat. Yeah, Sweat said that he did the defensive end conditioning drills. He was doing conditioning with the defensive ends. So I don't know. Yeah, I assume he's not practicing with the defensive ends because that doesn't seem productive. But I guess he was doing the defensive end conditioning drills, which is great.
So it's like this is the second storyline where a player has been doing out of position workouts at Bears training camp. You think
I think Dexter purposely did defensive end. I have a hard time believing it, but the way that the story was pitched to me was that Darnell Wright mistakenly was doing the wide receiver conditioning stuff. So I don't know if he was next to DJ Moore running sprints or if he just in his own time was doing the conditioning drills, but he just like got sent the PDF and it was labeled wide receiver, or he was trying to find the PDFs and he thought wide receiver was right tackle and got mixed up. But I think this was a little more intentional with Dexter.
Yeah, it's funny to think of him going out on his own on the field after practice, like just looking through his phone to see the workouts and thinking like, God, it's a lot of freaking running here.
God, that's so much. Yeah, a lot of sprints here. The last point that we have, and I feel like this is one of the main training camp points that we'll have throughout the rest of this training camp period, is the battle for the interior of our offensive line. So I think the left part of our line is shored up with Tevin Jenkins, but the center and right guard position I feel like are it's open season there with Nate Davis, Shelton, and Ryan Bates. There's a lot of people kind of moving around there and you don't know who's going to fill in. But to talk about the center position, there's reports of the snaps being off or not reaching the quarterback, which seems like something that you deal with in like high school football or peewee football of snapping the ball.
Certainly.
You kind of got to find the guy who can snap the ball without looking between his legs. So I don't know if that's like kind of what's going on right now. Or this is a chemistry thing. It seems like the snaps are off, which maybe this isn't a big deal, but something to note. But I think it kind of hits on the point that center is still an open battle right now. And I think Ryan Bates has been taking the most recent first team snaps, but I don't think that this is solidified at all, especially with Nate Davis not playing. But I think a bigger point is that Connor Williams, who we have talked about earlier on this podcast, we talked about him at the birth of this podcast. We said Connor Williams is out there, and Connor Williams is still available. So I don't know if something's wrong with his medicals or maybe he's asking for like $1 billion or something, but Connor Williams is still out there, is still a quality interior offensive lineman. And if we're having all these beef ups at people not even be able to snap the ball or Nate Davis not even being able to get on the field, it seems like we should at least give a ring-a-ding-ding to Connor Williams and his team to see what's going on. But this interior of our offensive line is definitely the weakest point. I think Jenkins, Darnell Wright, and Braxton Jones are our 3 best linemen, probably in that order. But the interior offensive line still has a lot of work to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you made a lot of great points there, Connor. I mean, we saw last year when we had our center got hurt, and then a game, we had a backup center and was like snapping the ball at Fields' feet or over Fields' head. And you just think like something you take, a part of the game that you take for granted, that when you see it in mess up, you think like,
you didn't realize it could be an issue.
You didn't realize this could be an issue.
I didn't realize this was an aspect of the game that we had to worry about.
Yeah. This was so something that I guess you can appreciate when someone does it really well, which is like most centers. That's kind of like the first rule of being a center, is that's kind of your thing. But hopefully we can figure it out to kind of complete that line we got there.
Hopefully we can. So looking forward, we have our next preseason game against Buffalo Bills. That'll be very exciting. So that'll happen this weekend. So let's get excited for that. That'll be hopefully our first time that we can really see Caleb Williams play. But Pat, you got anything else to say?
I got nothing else to say except I got 4 or 5 questions. I got 4 questions for you. NFL players.
Quiz.
Dun, dun, dun,
oh boy, I did not know this is happening. Okay, but all the same, I'm ready to go. I guess the last time I did this quiz, I was thoroughly embarrassed by Ryan Frank. So I guess now I don't have Ryan Frank next to me, but yeah, sure. I'm ready. Let's go.
Let's go. Connor, the first player that I will give to you is Viking safety Harrison Smith.
Oh. I feel like white safeties all go to weird colleges. Is it a weird college?
It is not a weird college, no.
Cal? Give me a hint. What conference?
Maybe a lack of.
Oh, Notre Dame. Okay. Okay.
Correct. Notre Dame.
Shoot. All right, bad start. DBs are really defensive players are tough. DBs are tough. Okay, I'll bounce back though. Okay. He seems like Harrison. That's a Notre Dame guy. Yeah, I should have known that.
Yeah. Okay. Next one I got for you is Cowboys lineman. Zach Martin.
Crap. Is it Notre Dame?
Hold on.
Notre Dame, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Notre Dame. Okay.
That's a point. I'll give myself a point for that.
Next player I've got for you, Connor, is... Okay, we'll give you a point for that. We've got Demario Davis. Do you know where he went to college?
What?
Let's skip that one.
No. Demario. No idea. Where did he go?
Arkansas State. He's number 44 on the top 100.
Defensive players are hard, man. Dude, okay, you've stepped it up a lot.
Next player I've got for you is Charger safety Derwin James. Do you know where he went to college?
Delaware, right? No, Florida State.
Florida State.
Delaware.
There we go.
Florida
Yes.
Yes.
Delaware, Florida State, often spoken in the same sentence together.
No, there's another safety from the Chargers who's from Del or whatever. Not important. Florida State. Yeah.
Okay. The last player that I will give to you is Jets defensive tackle Quinnen Williams.
Bama. That was Alabama. Give me another one. Give me more.
Wait, was that a joke? Oh, I had no idea who that player is. Oh, wait, that's a real player? Oh, okay.
Quinnen Williams? Bama, right?
Let me look that up. I thought that was a player you were going to have no idea who it was because I had no idea.
He was like a top 10. Yeah, he was a pretty serious pick. He's like a beast. Yeah, Quinnen Williams.
Okay, last person we have Texans offensive tackle Laramie Tunsil.
Ole Miss.
That is correct.
Okay.
Bingo.
So I got Tunsil, right? I'll give myself Zach Martin, Derwin James, Quinnen Williams. Okay, that's 4. I'll
say Derwin James. You said Delaware first, but
then I said Florida State. Hold on. Let me look up Nazir Adderley. That's who I was thinking of. Nazir Adderley was a safety for the Chargers who was drafted around the same time as... It's not important. He was drafted around the same time as Derwin James and is also a safety for the Chargers, but he was drafted out of Delaware. But Derwin James, I know is FSU. Okay, so who did I get wrong then? I got Demario Davis and Harrison Smith.
So I think you missed Demario Davis. You missed Harrison Smith. Oh, okay. Do you know where Rashawn Gary went to college?
Michigan.
That was another one I was going to ask you. Bingo. Okay, we'll give you Rashawn Gary too.
All right.
That's all I got for you.
Little good, little bad, maybe a little bit like Caleb Williams at camp. I think there's a wake up call for me. I'm gonna hit the lab a little bit more and put a little more time in to make sure I'm up to snuff. But Pat, you got anything else to say? Do you have any more quizzes to?
I got nothing else to say. No more. Yes, no more quizzes. I got no more quizzes for you. I think I'm all good with the quizzes.
Well, Pat, that sucks for you because I have 100-question quiz for you. Just kidding.
No.
Just quitting. Just kidding. So I think that's going to do it for this episode of the Chicagolandians. Thank you guys for listening to the end of the episode. If you made it to the end of the episode, why don't you show us some support? Why don't you could leave us a review on iTunes or Spotify. Follow us on TikTok or YouTube as well. We post content as well, short form content or video content so you can see our faces, or share the podcast with a friend. I'm sure you know somebody who'd be interested in learning more about Chicago sports. So yeah, make sure to show some support for the podcast. So Pat, you got anything else to say?
I got nothing else to say except bear down, baby.
Bear down.